The morning light poured through the lobby's glass facade, catching on chrome accents and polished shoes. Keycards clicked at gates with rhythmic precision. Everyone moved with purpose, practiced, sharp, as though being 5 seconds late would cost them their future. He stepped through the revolving door quietly. No fanfare, no name tag, no company-issued backpack. Just a coat that had faded over years of weather and a calm in his eyes that no schedule could shake. The reception desk barely glanced up as he passed. The woman behind it was young, efficient. She smiled in the way people smile when they believe they're helping someone out of place. Visitor check-in is to the right. He nodded but didn't turn. Instead, he continued toward the executive elevator bank. Its access was restricted. A small group waited beside a red rope, dressed in crisp layers, laughing in low tones. One of them held a platinum tier badge. Another wore a blazer embroidered with the company's original launch slogan. Ironically, a phrase he had written himself. He stopped behind them. A man turned, eyeing him from top to bottom. "You might be in the wrong place, sir." He didn't answer. The elevator dinged. The attendant stepped forward, holding a tablet. She scanned the line. "Executives only," she announced, her voice smooth but final. He reached into his satchel. Not a phone, not a wallet, a single document. Paper, yellowed at the edges, folded neatly. The woman took it out of habit, scanned the header, then again. Her fingers froze on the page. Her lips moved before her voice did. It wasn't a resume. It wasn't an invitation. It was the founding charter, the document that formed the company. His signature was on the bottom. Not printed, inked, with a pen older than the building. She looked up, then again, then down. The others in the line fell quiet. He took back the document gently, then stepped forward. The red rope unclipped without a sound. No one objected. He entered the elevator alone. Above, the floors passed by, each one named in frosted glass. Finance, strategy, growth, legacy. He didn't need a label. He was the reason the floors existed. At the top, he stepped out into a hallway lined with photographs. Black and white to color, progress captured in snapshots. Teams, launches, celebrations, rebrandings. His photo wasn't among them, not because he had been erased, because he had chosen silence. The boardroom was empty. He walked to the window. Below, the city pulsed. The same city he had mapped with dream-scribbled plans, back when the company was 3 people in a borrowed basement. They had no capital, just conviction. Back then, the mission was clear. Build something real. Make something useful. Treat people like they mattered. Now it was performance. He turned from the window and walked slowly to the conference table. He sat in the same chair he had once picked out, not for price but for posture. A chair meant to remind its occupant they were meant to listen. He waited, not for recognition, for a reckoning. The board began to arrive in slow, careful waves. Leather shoes, measured nods, the dull chime of digital watches syncing to meetings yet to begin. Their conversations were clipped and coded: share values, expansions, exits. Not a single word spoken without calculation. They didn't see him at first. He sat in the far end of the room, a silhouette in the shadow beside the window, fingers folded over a legal pad that had no logo. The room was accustomed to brightness, to projection, to dominance. He offered none of that, just presence. One of them paused, brows furrowed. Recognition struggled against disbelief. He didn't rise. He didn't need to, because the air shifted the way it always does when the truth walks in without announcement. Whispers spread fast but stayed controlled. A few phones quietly slipped into pockets. A few eyes darted to the head of the table, unsure whether to acknowledge or ignore. Then the CEO entered, young, energetic, brilliant on paper. He smiled on cue and spoke with conviction. He had inherited the company, not through blood or buyout, but through boardroom maneuvering. His tenure was celebrated in trade magazines. His face had been on 3 different covers in 2 years. He stopped when he saw the man. The air tightened. No one introduced them, because introductions weren't needed when the foundation itself sat in front of you. He greeted the room and moved quickly to agenda items. Expansion into Europe, vertical integration, downsizing of legacy overhead. None of it surprised the man in the coat. He'd seen it before. Not these words, but this drift, the slow erosion of purpose under the weight of strategy. He listened, carefully. When the talk turned to monetizing internal infrastructure, squeezing more from the people who had built the platform's backbone, he finally moved. He reached into his satchel, pulled out a thin manila folder. No logo, no headline, just paper. Inside, the original employee code of ethics. Version 1.0. Back when they hadn't needed HR to remind them not to treat people like numbers. He laid it flat on the table. The nearest board member leaned forward, reading upside down. Others followed. The CEO kept talking, but his voice lost rhythm. Then the man finally stood, walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, wrote a single phrase. "What is it for?" That's all. He capped the pen, sat back down. Silence followed. It wasn't a challenge. It was a mirror. In that moment, the room didn't need answers. It needed to remember the question. The one they'd buried under KPIs and roadmaps and burn rates. The one he'd asked at the very beginning. Back when it wasn't a company. Just a dream in the corner of a warehouse. Outside, a crowd of employees filtered into the auditorium for the quarterly all-hands meeting. Laptops open, lattes in hand, notes ready for slogans. Inside the boardroom, the story was changing. Not with slogans, with return. The all-hands meeting began like everyone before it. Music pulsing just loud enough to suggest relevance. A stage lit in corporate blues, an MC smiling too hard for this hour of the morning. Screens glowed, phones buzzed. Dozens of heads nodded, half listening, half preparing their own updates. He sat in the back row. No chair reserved, no camera trained, no attention drawn. Just a quiet presence among employees who no longer recognized the man who had first signed their paychecks. On stage, the CEO was already midway through his script. Bold slides, buzzwords dressed in bullet points. Synergy, velocity, unified expansion. A round of controlled applause followed every third click. But his eyes didn't leave the founder. Not fully, not comfortably, because the founder wasn't clapping. He was watching, and everyone feels it when they're being truly seen. The CEO introduced a new initiative, a multi-million-dollar restructuring plan aimed at unlocking strategic value. Sounded clean, painless, almost optimistic, until the next slide showed what was being cut. Legacy teams, mentorship programs, R&D cells that didn't hit quarterly targets, but had once been the heart of everything. Across the room, screens reflected worried eyes. He stood, slowly, no mic, no lights, just the subtle shift of attention as hundreds of people turned to face what they didn't yet understand. He said nothing. He pulled a folded page from his coat pocket. Old, creased, faint ink. It was a sketch of the very first interface, hand-drawn, before the patents, before the IPO, when the entire company was 3 whiteboards and a second-hand coffee machine. He held it up. A few older employees leaned forward. They remembered it. They had built it. He passed the sketch down the row, then walked to the side of the auditorium and stood, not on stage, beside it, where the original builders had always stood, close enough to lead, far enough not to block anyone else's view. The CEO paused. For the first time that morning, he spoke without the teleprompter. He acknowledged the founder, called him a quiet force. The applause was scattered, polite. He nodded once in return, not as gratitude, but as permission to continue. Not unchecked, not unwatched. Outside, near the front gate, a maintenance worker on his break scrolled through a photo someone had posted, the sketch now gone viral among employees. No caption, just reverence. By the end of the day, it had replaced the company logo as a background on more laptops than the brand team could control. He didn't ask for credit. He never had. He just stood at the edge of the story he started, watching the company remember who it used to be and who it still had time to become again. The office was quieter now. In the days following the all-hands, the air inside the building shifted, not like a storm, but like a tide pulling back. The hallway conversations grew softer. Eyes lingered longer on old photographs. People started using the stairwells again, walking slower, not just climbing upward but looking around. He returned. Not every day, but often enough. Not to inspect. To remember. To notice what others had forgotten. He visited the lower floors. The ones without windows. The ones that housed the people who made the code run, the servers hum, the lights stay on. They didn't know him at first. He sat beside them, asked about their tools, not their titles. He traced lines of logic on whiteboards and pointed out places where their code still echoed choices he'd made decades earlier. They stared at him like a myth, then like a mentor, then like one of their own. Because he was. One evening, he visited a team in the annex building, contractors, mostly. Left out of the town halls. The kind of team that never had their own hoodies printed. They were troubleshooting a problem in a system he'd written the first version of, long since rewritten but not rethought. He sat down. Not to correct. To offer. By the end of the night, they weren't talking about him anymore. They were talking with him. Upstairs, the board reviewed engagement metrics. They noticed a drop in attrition. An uptick in internal collaboration. Messages sent across team lines that had once been rigid. They couldn't explain it in charts. But it was there. One morning, the head of brand design stopped him in the hallway. She held a box. Inside, mock-ups for the company's 25th anniversary. T-shirts, pins, banners, all slick, market-tested. He asked to see the discarded concepts. She hesitated, then handed over a smaller folder. Inside, an early idea. A sketch traced from his first UI design wrapped around the words, "still building." He pointed to it. She smiled. By the next week, the phrase had quietly become internal shorthand. Not on posters. On coffee mugs. On Slack statuses. On notebooks filled with ideas that hadn't yet been pitched but now felt like they had permission to exist. At the quarterly leadership summit, he didn't take the stage. He walked through the back of the room, greeting the staff by name, even those who wore no name tags. He stayed until the last light dimmed. Then walked the empty halls one more time. At the original server closet, now just a glass cube for nostalgia, he paused. It still held the old router. Still buzzed faintly. Still worked. He placed a new sheet of paper next to it. No speech. No plaque. Just a line, handwritten in steady ink. If it still works, take care of it. If it doesn't, remember why it once did. Then he left the building through the same side door he'd used 25 years earlier. Not as a guest. Not as an executive. As the builder. The rain arrived before morning. Soft at first, a mist across the plaza tiles, then stronger, streaking across windows and soaking into the jacket shoulders of employees arriving early. The lobby hummed with umbrellas and elevator chimes, and for once, no one was hurrying. Upstairs, in a room no one had used in years, he sat with an open binder. Not digital. Paper. Old meeting minutes, sketched roadmaps, lists of names, not of clients, but of the first employees. Some names were now on office doors, others had vanished into different industries, cities, lives. He ran a finger over one in particular, circled in pencil. The first person who ever told him, "I'll build it with you." They hadn't spoken in over a decade. But they were still part of the origin. A knock. The CEO stepped inside. No cameras. No assistants. Just him. Tired, maybe. Humbled. He didn't speak right away. He sat down across from the founder, glanced at the binder, then reached into his own folder, newer, glossier, and slid across a report. Inside, a full reversal of the strategic value restructuring. Every name retained. Every team intact. A note handwritten on top. "We can grow without shrinking people." The founder nodded once. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Respect is quiet. They sat in silence. Until the sound of laughter filtered up through the floor. Real, unpolished laughter from the break room 2 stories below. They both looked toward the sound. Then back at the table. In the coming weeks, changes unfolded fast. Not because of pressure, but because of momentum. The old mentorship program quietly relaunched. Team leaders began opening weekly question hours. No agenda, no judgment. The product team released an internal update log that included not just bugs fixed, but people thanked. One Thursday, the security guard from the front desk found a package at her post. Inside, a photo of her giving directions to the founder on his first morning back. Below it, a note. "You didn't know me, but you treated me like I mattered." She never spoke of it, but she framed it and placed it beside her monitor. In the shared creative studio, someone pinned a printout over the glass wall. An old company photo with arrows drawn in pen, pointing to faces that had once been invisible. Someone wrote in red marker, "Still here, still building," and underlined it twice. The founder continued to walk the halls, not to supervise, to support, to make sure the weight was still being carried well. Sometimes he would leave post-it notes on whiteboards, never signed, with phrases like, "You're closer than you think," or "The small things are the thing." No one knew who left them, but everyone started copying the style. Culture spreads fastest when it doesn't need permission. And the building began to feel like it did in the early days, not less polished but more real. The mission had returned, not rewritten, remembered. The company's anniversary arrived without fireworks. No stadium rental, no influencer campaign, no choreographed sizzle reel with slow-motion shots of keyboards and corporate jargon turned cinematic. Just an open-door day. Employees brought family. Kids ran through halls that once hosted board meetings. Retirees returned, some with canes, others with new businesses of their own, walking past old projects displayed like trophies, their fingerprints still embedded in the glass. At the heart of the campus, someone had converted the old server room into a gallery. No plaque announced it, but word had spread. People lined up, not for photos, for silence. Inside, on a pedestal under soft white light, sat the original prototype. Dusty, unfinished, beautiful. It was held together by tape and belief. Notes still scrawled in permanent marker. The screen flickered when plugged in, like it remembered its own heartbeat. Beside it, a chair. The one the founder used to sit in when writing code alone at 3 a.m., coffee forgotten beside him, the only light coming from the monitor and the blinking router. He stood nearby, watching from behind the crowd. Not as a symbol, as a participant. Someone handed him a cup of coffee. No label, no lid. He nodded in thanks, then stepped outside. In the courtyard, 3 interns were seated around a bench, laptops open, debating something technical. Their voices were low but passionate. He recognized the pattern, the obsession, the love. He didn't interrupt, just watched. The CEO joined him a few minutes later, this time without a folder, without a calendar alert. Just a look that said, "We're good." No speeches, just presence. Later that day, someone posted a photo online. The founder standing beside the old server, his hand resting lightly on the chassis like it was still breathing. The caption read, "Some people build companies, others build culture." It was reposted thousands of times, but he never saw it. He was already in motion. A week later, he quietly transferred his remaining shares into a trust. No press release, no ceremony, just a legal signature and a handwritten clause. This company belongs to the builders. He left the office the same way he entered on his first day, through the side door, coat on, eyes forward. The building stayed behind him, but the mission traveled with him, not in code, not in patents, but in the way people now walked through that door without fearing whether they belonged. The line that once excluded him? Gone. Now there was only one line left. The one that asked, "Are you here to build something real? If yes, you are welcome."